something that I feel like has happened for me over the last several years is like part of my relationship with the Lord. And I feel like the way he's gifted me is like just giving me insight into seeing how certain things work, like in the spirit and in just like the world in general. And I want to share some of those insights with you guys today. And this is a talk that has evolved over the last 4 years. I have affectionately titled it, Don't Be a Sucker. And you'll see why. So I want to start with 2 scripture passages. I'll just read them to you. The first is Colossians 2:8. It says, "See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on human tradition and the elemental spiritual forces of this world, rather than on Christ." Romans 12:1-2. "Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." The Colossians 2 passage, the first time I really studied that, I had heard it a lot growing up, but I studied it in Bible school, and I really was putting it in the context of the false religions of the day. So, at the time there was emerging Gnosticism and stuff like that. And I was like, oh yeah, don't get sucked into these false religions. And as I've gotten older and looked at it, I'm like, really, I think that's just talking about culture. And something I will use repeatedly, I will call the world system. And I love that this is a group, we all have some level of belief in spiritual warfare. And I think there is direct spiritual warfare where demons are actually influencing individuals, proposing, lying, things like that. And then there's kind of the larger structure that exists where I think that Satan is very much involved in the world system and the world's values. And those things are a lot more subtle, but I actually think they have a lot more impact on people at large and probably a lot more impact on us than we realize. So I want to pull back the curtain on things and show you the way I see things and the way I feel like the Lord has revealed some stuff to me, okay? The race is about to be over. You guys are about to make choices on what the next season of your life looks like. And I think the choices that you're going to make are going to probably shape not just the next couple of years, but potentially the next few decades of your life. And obviously we're in a room where people are at very different seasons. We've got people who are 20 and people who are 40 and everything in between. And those are different seasons of life. But as you enter back in, I want you to look back on this year and then also look at the year ahead with maybe a different lens. So I want you to first just close your eyes for a minute. I love when people tell me to close my eyes. Not really, but I want you to think of a moment this year that you felt truly alive. Not because of stuff, but because of purpose or connection, or you just felt like, man, I'm doing what I was made to do. Maybe you partnered with God in a way that made you feel that. I want you to just think about what was happening. Feeling fully alive. All right, you can open your eyes. Now I want you to think about what does the world tell you that you need to feel that way? If you just think about marketing and the system of the world around you, what are some things that are going to make you feel fulfilled and alive? Money. Yeah. A house. Nice car. What? A career. Yeah. Husband. Yeah, you're locked in. I love it, Nicole. You're.
I already lived in the world. That's why I know these things.
Yeah. we've all lived in it to some extent, right? Yeah, there's all these things, and maybe at points this year you've found yourself feeling strangely alive with none of the stuff that you thought was needed. I remember the first time I really had a reflection on this. It was 4 years ago, and I was in a village in Cambodia. The village was called Chuk. and I was with my friend Drew. He was a squad leader, and we're like laying on these metal bunk beds, and I'm in this like metal shack, like looking up at literally the swinging light bulb that was attached to a ceiling fan, you know? And like I had just had the best day. And I'm laying there talking to Drew, and just like I just felt so full of life. And I'm like, what else do you really need? You know? And who in like America would think that you could be so happy to be in a shack in on an uncomfortable bed, just like having such a life-giving conversation? And it just started me down this path of like, what are we told that we need, and why do we buy into the narrative so quickly? You're all about to head back into a stream that has a very strong current. And when I think about culture, I think of it as a stream. And like a stream with a current, like if you get into it, it moves everything in one direction. And it typically takes a lot of work to move in a different direction than the one that the stream's going. And in a lot of ways, regardless of where you're going, whether it's if you're going back to Reading and you're going to be in the Bethel environment, stuff like that, if you're going back to a home church somewhere else, if you're going back to your home country, whatever, each of those places has a current that we're largely unaware of. Culture, you guys have maybe heard like the analogy or the story, like that where there's like these fish swimming in the water, and one fish says to the other one, like, how's the water today? And the other fish says, what's water? And that's kind of like culture, like it's around us and impacting us all the time, and we're typically like completely unaware of it. Just like a fish is unaware of like water. It's just like there. It's just a thing, you know? And if we don't intentionally take control of our lives and decide what they're going to look like, the script will be written for you. And yeah, I'm not saying you're going to walk away from your faith and abandon Jesus and all of this stuff, but the vast majority of your time in your life is very likely to be eaten by cultural values if you don't set your own and determine a path that's going to enable those. Later this week, Daniel is going to do a session with you guys. I'll be a little bit involved, where we are going to talk about values and having a vision statement for your life that really allows you to make decisions that will align with your priorities. But in the absence of doing that, we just get eaten alive. What are some of the values that you know culture is going to try to pull you into when you head back to wherever you're going from here? Convenience. Yeah, that's what you said, convenience, right? Okay. Individuality, yeah.
Time is money.
Time is money.
I was going to say efficiency.
Efficiency, yeah. Performance. Comfort. Financial freedom.
That's really what I'm taking. I don't know what y'all talking about.
Yeah.
You already have it.
Yeah.
All right.
There's these things, and like, I think we need to recognize what the values of our culture are, because if we don't, like, they'll shape us without us realizing it. So yeah, stuff I wrote: wealth, comfort, pleasure, success, security. And these lead to busyness, distraction. Yeah. And it's this great combination of things that will keep you ineffective and unproductive in your faith. And sure, we'll go to church, and depending where you're at, you might still have like the amazing times of worship and the times of ministry. But if you look at like the vast majority of your time, it will likely end up being consumed by the things that the world values. What is needed to have a good or a happy or a fulfilled life in this constantly increasing like consumer mentality? I really believe that the consumer mentality and like the consumer culture is a beautifully like demonically inspired system. I think it is actually the best way that the enemy can steal, kill, and destroy. So I'm gonna touch on a couple of things. I'm not trying to offend anybody unless you need to be offended, okay? So here's some examples of just like little things that we probably don't think about. When you think about a car that you're gonna drive, what options does your car need? What capabilities does your phone need? What type of clothing do you need? How much do you need? How much do you need to eat out? There are things that like, there are phrases that I hear a lot that every time I hear them, I'm kind of like, oh, people are like, come on, treat yourself. You deserve it. I'm like, why? There's one that gets said by a certain family member of mine, not my immediate family, where it's like, oh, just be selfish. And I'm like, oh. And this one person will try to say it to my wife to motivate her to like do something for herself. I'm like, you don't know my wife. The moment you said be selfish, there's no chance she's going to do it now. Like even if she was going to do it before, that statement as motivation has completely killed it. But there is this like, oh, come on, treat yourself. Yeah, we'll talk about that. That was my next point. Weddings. Let's talk about weddings for a minute. So just to make sure I can offend as many people as possible. Your wedding. Everything has to be perfect, right? Who cares what anybody else wants? This day is about you. Says who? Right? Like you can't tell me like that the culture around weddings isn't at least partially evil and bad for your soul. Okay? How many of you guys have heard of this phenomena of Bridezilla? How many of you have experienced it with people? Okay. Okay, so that's like when sometimes you get this person that is typically like super kind and loving and all of this stuff, and all of a sudden they become like selfish, mean, and demanding. And you're like, what the heck just happened? And so we've actually seen this happen several times. And at one time, Katie and I were like processing this with a mentor of ours. And we're like, I don't get it. And she said this thing to us. She goes, life is not meant to be about us, and we're not supposed to make everything about us. And then all of a sudden, like your wedding day comes and people are like, everything's about you. That's actually kind of an immense amount of pressure, and it turns you into something you were never supposed to be. We had an experience where one of the kindest and most selfless people we know, her wedding was awful. And like my wife was a bridesmaid, and she, like when I showed up at the wedding, she was like, I cannot believe what's happening right now. This is awful. And so that day went on, and it was rough. And later on, Katie said to me, she goes, I wonder if she knows like how bad she was, And one time we went to visit her at her house. Have you guys ever thought this about somebody at a wedding before? And we went to her house, and we're looking around, and they were like relatively newly married, and there were no pictures of her wedding. And she actually ended up bringing it up to us, and she's like, you know what? I actually don't want anything that reminds me of that day because I was terrible to people on that day. And I was like, oh, she knows. But it's like there is this thing where culture is going to tell you like life is about you and your pleasure, and you actually need to seek it, and you deserve X, Y, and Z. And on the surface, that can almost sound loving, but what does it end up costing you? Your dream house. How big does it need to be? And why? What features? Did you actually think you needed a pond in your front yard before you saw it on HGTV? Like even a lot of these things like seem really innocent, right? Like HGTV, what's wrong with that? It's like, who do you think funds all of these like house flipping shows? It's people who are trying to sell you crap, And it's like, oh, like Home Depot donated all of this stuff. And it's like, yeah, how many millions of dollars are they going to make off of people watching that being like, I need one of those in my bathroom? And it's like, why? And it's just like, there's all this stuff like There are billions and billions of dollars spent every year trying to convince you of what you need. Okay? Comfort, comfort, comfort. And then, as you become a parent, what do your kids need to be involved in, and what opportunities do you need to give them if you're a good parent? They can't just play sports. They need traveling sports. Do you actually want your kid to be successful? Do you want them to be good at sports? Do you want them to fit in? Do you want them to be rejected by other people because they're not as good as others? Right? And there's like all this pressure around parenting where people like feel like, what do you need to do to actually set your kids up well? And it's like so many of those things that are supposed to set your kids up well actually like steal, kill, and destroy, and they take the life and they take the joy out of things that were supposed to be like serving to kids and families. Right? What? Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's like, it's real. And like, I'm super passionate about this because like, if we don't wake up to what's going on, this stuff really will eat your life without you realizing it. And you'll look back 20 years from now and be like, what the heck did I just spend my life on? I'm going to reference a couple of articles. One of I sent this section to the guys chat the other day, but I'm going to like read it to you. Yeah. Just like we do guys nights. Speaking of which, we need to do a guys night before we split up for ATL. Okay. We actually talked about maybe organizing a girls night so you could actually do one, but
what we'll do is we'll plan the guys' night, and we'll also plan the girls' night.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I don't need y'all to plan a guys' night. We got it. Okay. So I'm gonna read you an article by an author that I've come to really enjoy their perspective on a lot of things. This kind of cuts into the middle of it, but the business model of most consumer technology is to identify some thick desire, find the part of it that produces a neurological reward, and then deliver that reward without the rest of the package. Social media gives you the feeling of social connection without the obligation of actual friendship. Pornography gives you sexual satisfaction without the vulnerability of partnership. Productivity apps give you the feeling of accomplishment without anything being accomplished. In each case, the thin version is easier to deliver at scale and easier to monetize and easier to make addictive. The result is a desire of pure sensation, and none of it seems to be making anyone happier. The surveys all point the same direction: rising anxiety, rising depression, rising rates of loneliness, even as we've never been more connected. How could this be when we've gotten so good at giving people what they want? Here's the kicker. Maybe because we've gotten good at giving people what they want in a way that prevents them from wanting anything worth having. I'm going to reread that. Maybe because we've gotten good at giving people what they want in a way that prevents them from wanting anything worth having. Let that sink in for a minute. I will read one more time, yes. Maybe because we've gotten good at giving people what they want in a way that prevents them from wanting anything worth having. Who decides what your life's going to be about? How will you spend your life, your time, your money? You need to be aware when you're being drawn into something, like what's their agenda? And what's their plan for your life? Okay, so we've got this consumer culture. You need all this stuff. How in the world are you going to pay for everything that we're telling you need? Welcome to the next part of the system, okay? We've got a great plan for you over here. Give us your life, and we'll give you the money to buy the stuff from us that we tell you need.
Yeah.
It's a well-designed system, okay? So I want to point something out here. Historically, I geek out over some of this stuff, but I want to talk about productivity growth versus wage growth over the last 80 years, okay? So from 1948 kind of right around the Industrial Revolution time, if you will, to 1979. So that's like a 30-year period. There was a 118.4% productivity growth. That's like how much economic output do we get for the amount of work put in, okay? So 118%. There was 107% wage growth. So those are like pretty close, right? They're tracking along. From 1979 to 2019, which is 40 years, there was a 64.7% productivity growth. Wage growth, 14.8%. So productivity goes up, wages go slightly up, okay? So productivity grows 4.4% more, or 4.4 times more than wages. And I'm sure that this trend has only gotten worse probably since 2017, 19, right? So where is the excess productivity going? Yeah, technology is fueling it. The excess money or productivity is primarily going to a couple of things. One of them would be corporate profits. If you actually look at corporate profits over time, it's crazy. Like the amount of growth, if you look at the way that like company value has increased as opposed to like the common net worth of an average person, it's like ridiculous. There's stuff out there, and I'm not somebody who's just like, I'm not advocating for socialism or anything here, but I will say, in 2023, the average CEO to worker pay ratio for S&P 500 companies, okay, so how much the CEO makes versus how much the average employee makes is 268 to 1. Okay, so this guy makes more than 268 average people in the company. And that's just the CEO. That's not even talking about like corporate profits and how much money goes into what I'll just call like the system. All right. There's also something else that impacts this. This is like actually, I'm going to rewind for a second. In 1930, there was a guy named John Maynard Keynes. He wrote this crazy prophetic article called Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren. If any of you want to read it, Ethan, I can send it to you. But he basically projected, like, so 1930, the world was kind of going through a bit of a depression at the time, okay? Economic depression. And he basically wrote this article and he said, like, okay, guys, here's what I see coming in the future. And he talked about the growth of technology. He talked about the growth of information and knowledge and all of the efficiencies that would come with it. And if you read it, like, it's crazy how spot on he was with what would happen. He missed one huge thing. He basically said, like, the world's going to be so much more productive because of technology that people are only going to have to work 15 hours a week to meet their basic needs. 15 hours a week. Not too many people out there with the 15-hour work week. Yeah. So what happened? The efficiency happened, the productivity happened, and the consumer culture grew to eat all of that up. Right? So spending went way up, inflation of lifestyle went way up. And if we just step back and take a look at it, it's like we actually want crap more than we want our time. And we probably wouldn't sit and like say that, but if we look at the way we actually end up living our lives, you can't get around the fact that it's true. Or at least we've become suckers and we're just sucked into this system without realizing it. Work harder for less, but you need more. Right? That's a system set up for us to lose. This is what I would call a hollow and deceptive philosophy. You need more. Work for us, and we'll give you money to buy from us the things that we're telling you need. That is a very basic outline of what I think the world system is for, I think, the cultures that pretty much all of us live in. And the church is not impervious to this. Like, we've got some aspects of our life that are different, but I think if you look at the way most people spend a majority of their lives, they're sucked right into this system. Okay. Have you ever heard of the term prime earning years? Okay. What are typically those prime earning years in your understanding of it? Nope. Now, 20s are not your prime earning years. 20s is when you're trying to figure out what the crap you're doing and how you're going to make money. So like 35 to 60 is about your prime earning years. And really, it's like, it's probably more like 35 to 55, okay? So 20 years.
I think that's going up now more because people are retiring later because of expenses.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. It's extending a bit for sure. But what are other things of significance happening during those prime earning years? Yeah, having a family. Those are probably also your best years to invest in relationships. It's probably also the years you would have the most to contribute to your community, your church, your family. They're the years where really you have like your best health and vitality of life. But it's also your highest potential to make money, which, as I'm talking about, mostly for other people. Another question. What hours of the day are you typically at your best? Depends on the person. Fair. I will say, it's not like coincidental that the working hours are like 9 to 5. I have been around you guys for 8 months. To get the majority of you to show up in any type of meaningful way before 9 in the morning is sketchy. To get the majority of you to show up at your best after 6 o'clock in the evening, also probably not that great, right? These hours in like the middle of the day are really collectively the best hours. So, like, give us the best hours of the best years of your life to amassing resources that you don't actually need in exchange for a life that you actually truly long for. And then try to fill in the rest of your priorities around like the edges of that. I realize there's obvious, like, I'm just going to say this, there's obviously realities of like, we have financial obligations we have to meet. It's not like just don't work and ask people for money and hope things work out well. Like, that's not what I'm advocating for. I'm saying, like, pay attention and be intentional about this. Don't just be a sucker and give the best hours and the best years of your life to amassing crap. Work isn't bad. Money isn't bad. Being a slave to those things absolutely is. Trading it for the best stuff is foolishness. That unfortunately we very often do. Okay. Questions or comments before we move on?
What is the core, like the crux of what you're saying? Because if I were to remove a specialized lifestyle with a subsistence lifestyle, I would still be working a lot of the hours between 9 to 5 to stay alive in an agrarian society. So my time, regardless of whether I'm in one economic system or another, whether I'm making money or I'm making potatoes to feed my family,
Yeah.
still revolves around a lot of this. Like is the point, like, of course this isn't your point, to develop a dread around the reality that most of my life is spent working?
Yeah. Yep. So great questions. So the first thing I would say is who decides how much you need?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's like, that almost becomes like the primary driver. Because like so often your job and the income you're trying to get is based around what you think you need and what financial obligations you think you need to fulfill. Right? So this can go back to some of the things of like lifestyle stuff of like, how big of a house do you need? How nice of a car do you need? How, it's crazy when you start to look at cars. It's like, I had this conversation with a guy in Gap here like 2 years ago. And he was so excited to go home from the race. And he's like, oh man, I'm going to get, he's like, I want to go get a new Honda Accord EXL because he was excited to have leather seats and a sunroof. And I was like, well, let's just look for a second here at what's the price difference between, even if he was going to buy a brand new Honda Accord, like a base model that has everything you need, and then the EXL, which had everything he wanted. And it was literally like a $15,000 difference just to have some extra options. And I was like, okay, $15,000. If you were to, okay, we're going to do some math real quick here, okay? So $15,000. Let's say that, okay, let's say he's working a job where he's making $25 an hour. The reality of like, what's your take home pay if you make $25 an hour? Like, give me a rough number. Let's say tops $17 an hour, okay? So that $15,000 divided by the $17 and,
Yeah, I'm taking home like $2.50.
yeah. Okay, so, okay. So let's say we take that. So 60%, so 25 times 0.6 is 15, okay? So that means you're working 1,000 hours of your life to have freaking leather seats and a sunroof.
That's worth it, man.
That's a whole half year of a full-time job.
Okay, so yeah, doing the math. But here's the thing. It's all of this depends. And I'm not telling you what you need to do with your life. These are your choices. I want you to be aware of the choices you're making.
Yeah.
Is literally a half year of your life working full time worth being a little more comfortable and feeling cooler when you're driving around in your car?
The leather seats get real hot.
Yeah. So like to me, I'm like, but these people don't think this way. They think I want this and I am going to be happier if I have this. And if you think about like the job you go to, it's like, was 6 months of your effort worth that? All of the time, we're trading time for money. There's not a way to completely escape that system, but we like need to be aware of it and make sure that you're actually setting the parameters and you're setting the priorities. I have some people in my life, I have some friends who've made choices to make less money so they could have more freedom and time with their family. And they're like, you know what? We're not going to be able to go out to eat that often, but we're going to be able to have dinner together every night. That's more important than having excess money to go out to dinner. We're going to drive old cars that aren't going to be awesome, but we're going to have more time that we can get in that car and go places and spend time together because of the choices we're making about the kind of job we have, right? Like you need to be aware of the full reality of the choices you're making. Because even if you guys think of, and I don't want this to be like judge your parents' time, but if you think of, even of like your own parents' lives, how many of them thought this way about the way they spent their time and resources? I'm fortunate enough, like I did. My parents did not make a ton of money, but like my dad chose a job where like he got home at 3 p.m. every day. So like when I got home from school, my dad was home. And you have to work on weekends. And like we spent so much time together. And like the time I had with my dad was worth way more to me than any experience he could have provided me by working more and having more money. You know? And like I'm really grateful. And like my dad was a mechanic. We kept cars running until literally the floors would fall out of them. Which was like awesome, right? And I was like, that's great. What? Yeah. 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 Well, the good news is you sit on the seat, so when the floor comes out, you just pick up your feet and keep going or run. Yeah. We had the Flintstone car. No, funny story. That was actually awesome. That car that the floor fell out of. I was like 13 years old when that happened, and so I got to turn that into a field car. And so my grandpa had this massive field behind his house, and I got to like go drive around this old station wagon in the field because you couldn't drive it on the road, but you sure could drive it around the field. It was like dust in the car, but it was awesome. So you think about like just you need to be aware of the trade-offs you're making, and then even as you select jobs and as you work towards things, make sure that it's actually serving the things that matter to you, and that you're not like subconsciously making trade-offs. There's a lot of you guys know who Brene Brown is. I saw her, she was talking on this one video, and she was talking about like goals and values, and she said like they had this value of spending time together as a family, and they had experienced some like amazing time together as a family when they would go and like rent this cottage on a lake and like just spend time together as a family. So then they had this goal that they were going to buy a cottage on the lake so they could spend time together whenever they wanted. But then they ended up working so much more that they didn't have time to go to a cottage anymore. And they're like, this is stupid. Like we're trying to buy this cottage and we're trading all of our time that we could spend just renting a cottage and going there as a family. But like we do stuff like this all the time, you know, without just being aware of what does it cost? Not just the money, but like the time behind the money. And the, you know, when it comes to spending things, even like going out to dinner, buying clothes, stuff like that, like I got in this mindset of figuring out like, once again, what was my take home pay and my hourly pay? So then like, how many hours do I have to work in order to pay for this thing I'm gonna do right now? And sometimes like, absolutely, I would do that 100%, but it's like, did I just work a whole day to buy a t-shirt? Like, no freaking way. Like I'll take one from the Goodwill, you know? But maybe you value clothes, the t-shirt's worth it, whatever. But like, at least make sure that your life is what you want it to be. Make sure that you're able to do the things you value. One of the things I realized, especially in the last 4 years, is I remember once again, I was sitting with Drew having a conversation, and he had said like, Bill, can we get some good time together? I'm like, yeah. So we're like, let's have breakfast, and I'm not gonna play anything afterwards. So we had breakfast, and we sat and talked for like 3.5 hours. And I remember walking away from that, and I came out of it with this value of like, I won't choose a life that doesn't allow me to have 3-hour conversations with people. Because most of my life up to that point didn't. I was always so busy and I had so much going on, but I was like, oh my gosh, 3 hours was so life-giving. For me, the privilege to sit down with you guys and hang out and spend 2 to 3 hours just like talking and giving you my time and not feeling like I had to run to something else, like that's such a deep core value of mine now. I won't accept a reality where I can't do that. There's things maybe you guys have come to find life in this year. Maybe it's that. Maybe there's a level of simplicity or a slower pace. The availability to like drop what you're doing and go do what the Lord is calling you to do in a given moment. Not necessarily like, I need to go somewhere for 8 months, but it's like, no, I need to actually step away this afternoon and go give time to that person. You can decide what those values are. We're going to go through, once again, a process later this week where you look at some values and what you want your life to be about. But don't be a sucker. Don't just get sucked into the world system and 20 years from now look back and be like, crap, I gave it all away for stuff that didn't actually matter that much. I'll share just like a little bit of our journey because I realize that because of what my life looks like now, it could be easier to dismiss me as an outlier. Fully aware of that. Like we spent a season where we actually busted it hard for like 10 years. Started out, we were both working full time, and we decided to live like a pretty simple life. We actually had a bunch of other people living with us, so our living expenses were like incredibly low. And for me, I started out with this goal of like, I want to get to a place where when we start having kids, Katie doesn't have to work. So that like started my journey of investing in real estate. And really my initial goal was like, we're just going to replace Katie's income so that we can keep going. And like, it was really important to us for Katie to be able to stay home with our kids, you know? And then like, as we like crossed that goal, it was like, okay, if we can keep pushing hard, I realized we were going to hit this point where our kids were going to be old enough that I wanted more time with them. But I was like, I can use this time to build up enough income and like other like passive income streams, passive-ish, where I can start to not have to be in a job that has such high demands of me. And we can be a little bit more free to invest more deeply in our family. And so there was probably, especially I would say 5 years in there where it wasn't uncommon for me to work 50 to 60 hours a week. And I kind of moved that around in such a way that it didn't like cost the family too much. So like a lot of times like I'd be at the office from like 8:30 to 5:30, and then I would be at home, and from 5:30 to 7:30 I was home like every night. And that was like dinner, bedtime routine with the kids, like so we're gonna have like some good family time. And then it was like go paint apartments, work on stuff, mow grass, like do whatever, you know? And like did that for a season. So like I am so not against hard work, but like the time I was putting in was serving the goals and priorities that we had as a family. And we very intentionally like designed those, and we saw a path towards what we were trying to create. And so like that made it worth it. And then we continually had the conversation and got to a point of realizing like, okay, it's time for that to shift. It actually happened during, Katie and I went on a walk on the beach one time, and walking on the beach, and the kids were actually like, the kids were with us, but they were like running around collecting seashells and stuff like that. And this was in September of 2021. And we were walking, and I've been talking to Katie for a little bit and just saying like, hey, I think things need to shift. And Katie finally, like, she said to me, she goes, if we're gonna live the kind of life we talk about living as a family, like it's not gonna happen with you holding a leadership position at AIM the way you have. It was like, yep, very true. And so we basically said like within the next year, like we're gonna make a significant change. I didn't know what it was. We were like, either I'm going to get a different job, I'm gonna go to like half-time, I'm gonna do whatever, but like we had built up enough income from like rentals and from like a side business that I was in a position to be able to do that, you know? And 6 months later came our first opportunity to actually go to the field as a family in April of 2022. And we were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And we've been out here ever since. And it was great, but like we just knew, for me, I was looking at, even with the changing needs of my family, like even if I was only gone from 8:30 to 5:30 every day, it's like in the morning, I would get up early enough to like spend time with the Lord, make breakfast for the family, and then leave for work. And then I would get home at 5:30, and it's like I would play with the kids for a bit while Katie was finishing dinner, and then we would eat dinner and the kids would go to bed. And I'm like, I want a lot more significant investment in my kids than these little bookends on the day, you know? And the way that the week is set up for most people in America does not actually serve families well. It serves companies well. And it's like, okay, if we want this to be different, we're going to have to take control. We're going to have to go against the current, because if we just do what people normally do, it's not going to serve our family, and it's not going to serve our priorities well. So yeah, I just want you guys to truly be aware, and as you start to dive into these things, as you start to dive into these next seasons, to not just think about what you're going to do for a job, but like to really think about, what is it that's important to me? What do I want my life and my time to be about? And what are the things that I'm going to have to put in place for that to actually be a reality? Because if you don't, busyness and hustle and then consumerism will eat so much more of your time than you realize. I'll just prepare you guys. Like I've talked to some of you about this. I've felt this multiple times now. Oh yeah, I talked about it with you guys already. I'll repeat myself. Like there's this thing that'll happen when you land at home where the pace is different, the energy is different, and you'll just feel the pull of so many things, even just being back in a different physical space. If you don't have a plan, you'll likely just get sucked back into the way things were. And my belief is that most of you are looking for something different. So we'll talk more later this week. Is it Wednesday? Wednesday we're doing that? Yeah. So in 2 days, we'll talk about how to actually figure out what your values are, how to develop somewhat of a life vision statement that can actually give you some focus and clarity on how you want to spend your time and how you want to spend your life. That's what I got. I'm going to stop recording and we can decide if we want any discussion from there.